Hello. Welcome back to what I think is going to be the last go on this painting of the tree in the barn scenery. One of the things that I wanted to accomplish, or at least introduce, this is basically for a project for a beginners. I wanted to introduce the how to use your oil paints and the different ways you can go about it. Since we're getting towards the end of the painting, we can build up a little thicker paint. So let's look at this mountain right here. We want to add a little darker, we want to have a separation, maybe, so think of what we're trying to do is to create distance on a flat surface. So we think of it as planes. For example, this one here is the closest plane to the viewer. So I'm going to make some flowers here. It's going to be a little bigger. Then comes this plane. It's farther away. This ones are farther away. The house, or the barn, I'm sorry. And then we have this trees. There are going to be trees and different types of foliage. It's even, back further away. And then there's these two mountains here, way out in the distance. Now, how do we make it so that it reads as being way out in the distance? Well, let's separate them. Let's add a little bit of separation there. So now we're going to make this one here is going to be a closer plane than this one behind it. And we were able to do that by separating with a value. So now I just added a tiny bit of raw umber to that purpley mixture, like that. Okay, so now that looks a little dark, but it's okay because we're going to play with it a little more. And like I said, this is our last possibly our last go at it, at the painting. It's coming towards the end. So I am painting a little thicker, but also I'm mixing a little bit of white to that, so that I can make it still not as in your face prominent bright colors, just enough to get the separation look of values, but not so bright that it's going to scream at us. Okay, so there, the same thing here. I'm going to have a little different highlights here and there, just so that it doesn't look like a flat mountain. Sometimes they're so far away in the distance that, yeah, you don't have to add detail, but if you add just a tiny bit of difference in values, you'll get that hint in your head that, oh yeah, it's a mountain with some crevices or some other kinds of hills and mountains within itself. Okay, so it's got a little more interesting two mountains there, and maybe Okay, so now what we're gonna do is come, the next plane would be, I'm thinking this in here. Let's see, what do we want to do with that? Well, we want to have a kind of a separation. Okay, so now we're establishing the different distances between our eye and the background. And so now we soften that edge. So we're breaking it up in different values. Okay. Now in here, maybe that is some more trees back there, way back there. That's why the edges are little, some of them are higher, lower, like that. There's more activity, more foliage, shrubbery and things like that in the background. Okay, so now in here, I think it's a good idea if we can also separate some of those trees and bushes and okay, so now there's this one here. I want to add a little brighter and lighter, so I'm coming with my light yellow, tiny bit of white, just to brighten that up a little bit. Now, in that area, right underneath that, I can get a little underneath that bush. I want to get a little bit, I'm coming in with my raw umber to get some shading, shadows, dark shadows in that area. And since it's like some bushes there, I'm coming in with a little raw umber, ultramarine blue, and adding that cast shadow underneath that. See? And I'm using a thicker paint now. For sure, you don't want any bare canvas showing. All right, now let's do a little, maybe a little door there. Maybe two. Now that roof right here, it seems to me like it's taking too much attention. It's too bright, not bright, but too much of a light value. So it's just sort of kind of screaming at us. So here I'm coming with some raw umber, kind of doing a brush, a dry brush, so that it looks like it's got some wood. It's kind of like a little shack, and I'm adding a tiny bit of red, not too much. I'm still doing the dry brush. And a tiny bit of yellow ochre. I think those reddish colors look so nice right up against all of that greenery. And why would that be? Oh, I know why, because it's the opposite in the color wheel. So there we go. Okay, we toned that down a bit. Also, I'm going to add a little more. There we go. Now, something else that I realized we need, emphasize a little thicker paint that casts shadow from this very cool shape of that roof. I'm doing that with a tiny little brush, it's a flat brush, kind of I chiseled it out, you know. You come in here and you smash it like this, lightly, but effectively. And I load it with your paint and then come on like that. Now, the way this is, the upper area, it's wider it's wider at the top, and then it kind of goes into very narrow as you descend down. Okay, the same thing on this side. So at this point you can reinforce some things like this. So it's very thin in here and wider at the top. All right, so also I'm going to reinforce a little more color in the corner of this half door. Sometimes there's like, open it up and there's a bunch of hay in there. Hey, I'll call you back. I'm doing a video.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so now we're starting to frame this area over here. And we do that with this little raw umber, put a little bit of red, add to that raw umber in here. And I'm going to come add some shadows, add a little bit of foliage in here. All right, so now I think this is too yellow. Tone it down just a bit right there. It's a little too, it was too taking too much attention. That bush there. All right, so now let's see, what do we want to do now here? In this, well, I'm going to make little, kind of little weeds in here to break that space up a bit. But what I wanted to show you, I darkened this area here, and now I love Queen, I think it's a Anne's lace. It's a flower. It's a weed, actually, apparently, I found out. But I think it's so pretty. I like it. Comes out in the summer. So I did this last night. It kind of dried a little bit, so which is fine. So with a very thin, fine liner, it's really seen better days. It's not brand new, so it's perfect because it's lost some of its hairs. I can come in here and make some, it's a very leggy weed, and at the very top it's got that lacy looking flower. So you can do this. See, before I did some of the wipeouts, I showed you how to do it last time, but now, and some of them I painted, some stems I painted. So what you want is a variety. Now this one's I am painting with this thin liner brush, but I was looking at that queen, that flower, that weed, and it's kind of interesting because it doesn't just have the leggy stem, but it also has the little tiny little leaves kind of crossing across it, which is, I think, kind of neat, kind of interesting. So right now I'm just doing the stems, and every once in a while I come and do a cross, kind of cross it with a shorter, because in the field you have all kinds of things happening. Ones go one direction, and then you get other types of flowers in there that have other shapes. So I think this is my objective with this painting, is for you who are starting out, or anybody really, but it can be introduced to the different types of techniques that you can use. You know, the wiping out, the glazing. Okay, so I think we've got enough weeds there. I may come back later here and accentuate some in here also. So if you were just using the yellow light by itself, that yellow green, it would just melt into your painting. But I am using it, and I am adding a little bit of titanium white. It really should be titanium because it's very opaque. If you use that zinc white, it's not going to be as effective. It'll work, but it won't be as effective because it's somewhat transparent. So at this point, you want something that's going to stay on top and to be visible. All right, so now to do the Queen Anne's, there's these little brushes. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to use these fan brushes. If it's a bigger one, they come in different sizes. Then you just go into your, I'm doing one side and then the other. And you just touch it and kind of turn. This is the very first time that you're going to be doing this. I really recommend that don't do it right away on your first. Have a little sample of paper, I mean a canvas cloth or something where you can practice and see the looks that you want. Okay, now some of them are going to have more, and some of them are just going to be like in a different direction and a lot smaller because they haven't opened up yet. So you don't want them all to be the same. Some of them are just a little bud like this coming out. See, you're looking for different. Always don't do, I know I keep using that term again and again, you don't want little soldiers lined up exactly the same way. Sometimes you want some shorties, sometimes some of them are, if they're turned, then you can see almost like a perfect sphere. See? And some of them have them come out over here so that you don't end up with a line like that. Think of this almost as icing on the cake. Thicker paint. And to be honest with you, I have never been able to grow this in my garden. But now I have them here. If you can't grow them, just paint them. But I do have my roses and lilacs and, well, I do have a lilac, California lilac. I have wisteria, so jacaranda. I have all kinds of beautiful, so I'm not going to complain. I'm not complaining, but I kind of did try a couple times and I couldn't get them. So they are quite abundant also once you start, once they start going, they fill up quite a bit. Now as I go into the background, again, they're getting smaller, right? Smaller and smaller. You don't see them as big as you do here. This one's because they're out there in the distance. All right, I think, let me see, what else do we need to do? I am going to work a little more on the tree, but I'll let you do that on your own, because I kind of gave you an idea of how to go about it. And now it's going to be, try it out. But I am also going to add probably a few clouds lightly. I might do that. There's a hair there. Oh, and something else I think maybe I should do is, oh, that's not going to work. All right. I don't necessarily have to, this is like a kind of a walkway or something. Doesn't have to be all green. So just gonna add just some dirt there. Maybe, hopefully it'll read as just a little bit of a, all right. So I will end right now, and I think we're about done with this. Okay, thank you so much for watching.